Okay, good day everybody, and welcome to the 10th webinar in our series on implementing the standard. Today we are hosting from Mental Health Commission of Canada. Over 400 of you have registered, so we definitely thank you for your participation today. Just a reminder, if you could mute your own lines, that would be fantastic. The session will be recorded and we will be posting it for your viewing in the next few weeks. So my name is Samantha Kolopak, and I'm a knowledge broker with the Commission, and I'm also joined by Julia Kaisla, and she's the Director for Community Engagement for the Canadian Mental Health Association BC Division. While her more formal role with CMHA BC involves overseeing workplace initiatives, public relations, and branch relations, she does spend her days writing and working with people. She's very passionate about making a difference and is committed to the promotion of mental health in Canada. She's also trained as a mental health works facilitator and travels to workplaces throughout BC to connect with human resource and occupational health and safety professionals to discuss the ways that they can start to improve their workplaces and make sure that they're mentally healthy. So at CMHA BC, Julia has worked with her own leadership team to roll out the Guarding Minds at Work survey and is now working with leadership and employee groups to improve the psychological health and safety of.
Is it a skirt?
Oh, I'm sorry. We do
really? You'd wear something underneath?
Need to mute. But anyway, I do want to introduce Julia. So welcome, Julia, and thanks so much for joining us. Oh, it appears that Julia might have been kicked off the line. Let me just see here. I can pull her up. Oh, there we go. Hi,
I'm
Julia.
Still here. Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us.
No worries.
Okay, so today's a full day. We've got a packed agenda, and I'm just going to review that with you. We are discussing psychological health and safety in the workplace and discussing the psychosocial factors that are found within the standard. I will take a minute now just to review what we're going to do today. We are going to look at a bit of a background on where this webinar today came from, specifically the Bottom Line Conference, and we're going to do an overview of the psychosocial factors. So 13 factors have been identified by Guarding Minds at Work, and many of these are also found within the standard. The standard itself actually has 14 factors, and we'll be discussing these, describing each factor as they relate within our own workplace, and then ask you to participate by rating your own workplace. So this will be followed up by a discussion on ways that we can address each factor. So sorry about the audio. I'm not sure that it's working perfectly today, but we're going to make sure that everyone can hear the message. And again, this will be recorded, so no worries if you're having any trouble with the audio. Okay, so as always, we do try and embed some questions for you as we go along. So please do ask your questions by typing into the chat box, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can type in there any comments that you might have or suggestions, or we're always looking for more questions to answer too. Lori is also on the line, and she's going to be moderating our chat today. And how about just to start, you can let us know where you're from and type that into the chat box. So Julia, how about we discuss the background and how this webinar came to be?
So every year for the last 11 years, the Canadian Mental Health Association BC Division has hosted a conference on workplace mental health called the Bottom Line Conference. And usually we have, the format is that the first day is a plenary session where we invite speakers like Jan Wong. She was our keynote this year. And then on day 2 we have workshops. And Marianne Baton has been a great supporter of our conference, and she has hosted workshops almost every year for the last few years. And on day 2, we had a full day of workshop. With for leaders, and Marianne invited me to co-host this workshop with her. So we had about 25 people in the room, and what happened was it was a very similar presentation to what we're giving you today, but we're going to make it very short today as opposed to a full 6 hours. And what we did is we went through each factor, and then the participants completed a similar quiz to what you're going to do today. And then after that, they all identified which factors they'd like to work on, and they broke into groups, and they brainstormed ways that they could address that specific factor, and then they came back and shared that information with the group. And it was a terrific learning experience for me because, as Sam mentioned, CMHA BC, we are rolling out the Guarding Minds at Work survey, so we're going through each factor. And so it gave me a lot of ideas to take back to my workplace, and I'm hoping I can share some of those ideas with you as well.
Thanks so much, Julia. So I'm going to describe today's process today. If everybody can take a piece of paper out, that would be really great. We are looking here at the 13 psychosocial factors, which again are from Guarding Minds at Work, which was developed by researchers at the Center for Applied Research in Mental Health and Addictions, or also known as CARMA, and can be accessed through the Guarding Minds at Work website, which is on the screen right now. So again, we would like you to write out each of these factors on a piece of paper, and we're going to be doing a quiz that's similar to a multiple choice test. So what we thought we would do today is just start off the webinar by answering the question, what are psychosocial factors in the workplace? And according to Guarding Minds at Work, psychosocial factors are elements that impact employees' psychological responses to work and work conditions, potentially causing psychological health problems. So to back up and give you a bit of context, it's pretty exciting. We've already done 10 webinars in our series so far on implementing the standard, including 2 in French. And when we started these workplace webinars, we spoke to Marianne Baton from the Great West Life Center for Mental Health in the Workplace. And we asked her what we should be really looking at. And she reminded us that this is all about our organizational approaches, policies, procedures, and practices that all have an impact on employee mental health. And then a few months ago, we actually heard from Merv Gilbert from Guarding Minds at Work, and he reminded us that these factors are really important to be reviewing, and we actually went into depth on civility and respect. And so one of the pieces of feedback that we received from you folks on the line was that we really should be looking at all of these factors one by one and making sure that everybody's on board and understanding what they mean. So again, we're going to describe the factors, then ask you some short questions about your own workplace, and then there's going to be some time to discuss some ideas in the workplace. So just to start off, I thought that we could do a polling question, and if this works out, please bear with me. The first question is if you can please let us know which of the factors do you feel are one of your organizational strengths. So you can choose more than just one factor, but which one do you think is done pretty well by your organization? And I'm just going to let that poll hang open for a little bit. Julia, I'm thinking that maybe this would be a good opportunity to chat with you a little bit about what factors were strong in your organization.
Yeah, so I'm sure it might not come as a surprise, but when you have an organization that works with people and is in the helping profession, quite often, you know, your workplace is very engaged in the work, and that was true for us at CMHA. When we asked this question, we rolled out the full Guarding Minds at Work survey to all of our staff. There are about 68 questions, and so let me just explain that what we're doing today is we're going through the organizational review, and that's something that leaders in the organization could undertake, and these are the questions we'll be asking you. But as a complement to that, and as the other side to that, sort of the reality check of the process, you can roll out a survey to your entire staff group, and then you'll get a sense from them about what the strengths really are in your organization. And so we did that. We rolled out the survey. And engagement, we were, at the top of our game when it came to engagement. People were very engaged in the work that they were doing with the community and with individuals. So I mean, it was a great opportunity to celebrate that.
Fantastic. So I'm just wrapping up the poll results right now. You have about 10 seconds to respond, and thank you so much to all of you who have. Looks like we have quite the spread right now, and I'm going to provide the poll results to all attendees right now. And so, Julia, you can probably see those too. It looks like we've got quite a lot who say that the protection of physical safety is a big factor that their workplace is pretty decent at, and that's not surprising again, right? A lot of our workplaces have looked at health and safety as being one of the primary factors that are important in the workplace, and so now we're trying to say psychological health is just as important, and actually physical health is part of that as well. Okay, so I think what we'll do is move on to our list of psychosocial factors, since we have 14 to go through. So why don't we start off, Julia, and you can let us know about the first one, psychological support.
Okay. So psychological support, in the national standard, this is also referred to as social support, and at the Canadian Mental Health Association, that is also the term that we use. So psychological support is a work environment where coworkers and supervisors are supportive of employees' psychological and mental health concerns and respond appropriately as needed. So psychological support in a psychologically healthy and safe workplace includes overall improved psychological health of employees, that the organization has policies and processes to support a successful and sustainable return to work program, that there are reasonable supports in place during times of emotional distress, crisis, or upset, and that people have a general understanding and awareness of mental health. This factor is a lot to do with how employees feel. Do they feel part of a community? Do they feel supported?
Excellent. So now we're going to go ahead and start our quiz. Again, take your first factor, psychosocial support or social support, that you've written down, and try to write down a score for each of the following statements that I'll be reading. The maximum number of points that you can receive on a question will be 4. So 4 at strongly agree, 3 at somewhat agree, 2 at somewhat disagree, and 1 at strongly disagree. And remember, just go with your first instinct, and this exercise will be easiest for you. So to what extent do you agree with the following statement? 1, our workplace offers services or benefits that adequately address employee psychological and mental health. 2, our supervisors would say or do something helpful if an employee looked distressed while at work. 3, employees feel supported in the workplace when they are dealing with personal or family issues. 4, our workplace supports employees who are returning to work after time off due to a mental health condition. And the last statement, people in our workplace have a good understanding of the importance of employee mental health. So now you can tally the score up, and you should get a number out of 20. So please write that number down under the psychological support factor, and then we'll be doing this for all the different factors, and we'll discuss the results at the end.
I think it might be helpful. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I was just going to ask you something.
I didn't realize. So yeah, the questions again are on the screen now. Unfortunately, as I was reading, I didn't realize that the screen was blank for you. But those are the questions that I read out. So please rate those, and we can talk a little. We'll leave that on the screen, I think, and Julie can talk to us a little bit about the psychological support ideas, and then I'll move to the next slide as she goes through that.
So yeah, so I think it's very interesting, and especially when you go with your gut instinct about where you think your workplace is. Some of the ideas around how we can address this particular factor is to start the process of eliminating mental illness stigma in your workplace, and that might involve bringing in speakers, starting on a campaign. We at the Canadian Mental Health Association offers workshops about specific to social support, and we also offer workshops on awareness. And we have a great range of speakers available to you throughout the country. Number 2 is to improve awareness of mental health. So what do we need to do to stay mentally healthy? We need to understand the risk factors and the protective factors for our mental health. And then the third would be to train union and management to respond when they believe mental health may be a factor, so they can differentiate that from a performance issue. We also offer, CMHA also offers training for leadership to have those difficult conversations. I know Marianne Baton is also offering a series of webinars through her Mindful Manager series. So there are a lot of supports available to you to address this particular factor. I also, just before we go on, when we talk about some of these ideas, I would like to draw your attention to the Guarding Minds at Work suggested responses, because if you go onto their website and then you download a series of handouts related to suggested responses, there are ideas about every single factor and things that you can consider doing. And when we rolled this out at CMHA, every time we focused on a different factor, we would print out those handouts and we would give them to staff so that we could start the discussion about what are the action steps we wanted to consider ourselves.
That's fantastic. So now we'll be moving on to the next factor, which is organizational culture in the workplace. Julia, would you like to tell us a little bit about this factor?
Sure. So culture is one of those terms that's thrown around a lot. I think my favorite definition is the way we do things around here. I think what it means here is that the way we do things around here is within a work environment characterized by honesty, trust, and fairness. And organizational culture in a psychologically healthy and safe workplace includes higher job satisfaction and morale, greater teamwork and collaboration, enhanced retention and recruitment, and that's also very much connected to the positive public and community image.
Excellent. So now we will turn to the organizational culture quiz. And there it is on your screen. Sorry about that before. And again, I just wanted to mention that there's no need to let everybody know what your score is right now. We can do that on our own on a separate piece of paper, and that way we can tabulate each factor. So to what extent do you agree with the following statements? Number 1, all people in our workplace are held accountable for their actions. Number 2, people at work show sincere respect for others' ideas, values, and beliefs. Number 3, difficult situations at work are addressed effectively. Number 4, employees feel that they are part of a community at work. And number 5, employees and management trust one another. So again, please tabulate your score out of 20 and keep that in mind. Julia, let's turn to some organizational culture ideas.
Okay, so I think this is where we talk about the rehumanization of work and the need for dialogue. So I think number 1 would be to ensure meaningful participation in values and code of ethics. 2, to provide communication skills and conflict resolution training for everyone. And 3, to encourage face-to-face communication. Well, and also just to encourage the right channel for communication so that we're not always relying on email as an option. So it's a pretty big one, and within our organization, it was one of the top 4 that we decided to address. Sorry about that. But we haven't started down that path yet, and I think it's going to require a lot of work within our entire staff group to talk about where our organization is and where we'd like to go and what is the gap and how can we overcome that gap.
Excellent. Yeah, I think those are some excellent ideas there, especially the face-to-face communication. I'm reminded of that all the time in my role. Many people say face-to-face is a great way to do knowledge exchange, and we need to do that more. Moving on now, we're going to look at factor 3, which is clear leadership and expectations. So, Julia, what's the objective here?
So this is where we ensure the work environment has effective leadership and support to help employees know what they need to do, know how their work contributes to the organization, and whether there are impending changes. In a psychologically healthy and safe workplace, clear leadership indicates it would be present when employees have clear expectations regarding job responsibilities and roles. Employee morale is positive, resiliency is high, even during times of stress and change. Employees have trust in management. Trust is obviously a word that keeps coming up, and there is less employee frustration or conflict.
Excellent. So now we will look at the Guarding Minds at Work quiz and go through a series of questions. So please let us know by writing out your scores how you agree, strongly agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree. It's a scale 4 to 1, being the lowest. And please let us know to what extent do you agree with the following statements. Number 1, in their jobs, employees know what they are expected to do. Number 2, leadership in our workplace is effective. Number 3, staff are informed about important changes at work in a timely manner. Number 4, supervisors provide helpful feedback to employees on their performance. And number 5, our organization provides clear, effective communication. So again, please tally your results at a 20 next to clear leadership and expectations. And just a reminder that I think participants should be able to go back and forth between slides should you have missed something. And if not, you can always email us. Lori's been sending out some information about how to get this presentation right away. So let's go back to Julia for some more ideas on clear leadership and expectations.
So the first one, and we did a workshop on this on day 2 of our Bottom Line conference as well, but it was about encouraging emotional intelligence development for leaders. And Dr. Jody Samra, who's one of the authors as well of the Guarding Minds at Work tool, she hosted a workshop where she helped managers and leaders understand their style. And she used a lot of the tools from the Workplace Strategies for Mental Health website. There are a series of different fact sheets, such as understanding your reactions and your triggers, and talking about shame in the workplace. They're really, really informative worksheets, and I'm sure that you will learn something about yourself when you go through them. The second idea would be to measure leadership competence. In our workshop on day 2 with Marianne, when we asked our participants for ideas about how to address this factor, there was a big debate about 360 reviews, but sometimes they can hold a lot of merit, and it is one strategy you can employ. 3 would be to strive for direct, accurate, timely, and face-to-face communication between managers and employees.
Excellent. So all great ideas there. The next factors that we'll be reviewing is civility and respect in the workplace. Now, we actually discussed a whole webinar on civility and respect, so hopefully some of you joined us for that. But just to review and perhaps let people know what this factor is about, Julia, for those who are new on the phone or listening through their computer, please let us know what the objective here is.
This is my turn, right?
Yes, please.
So civility and respect, it's a work environment where employees are respectful and considerate in their interactions with one another, as well as with customers, clients, and the public. In a psychologically healthy and safe workplace, there is effective teamwork with positive morale, reduced conflict among colleagues, effective resolution of conflicts that do arise, and respectful leadership at all levels.
Fantastic. So I'm just noticing we've had about over 300 participants on the line here, which is fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us. If you are just joining us, please make sure you have a piece of paper so you can follow along with our quiz. We are looking at the factors civility and respect, and please let us know or write down your thoughts on what extent do you agree with the following statements. So question number 1, people treat each other with respect and consideration in our workplace. Number 2, our workplace effectively handles people problems that exist between staff. Number 3, people from all backgrounds are treated fairly in our workplace. And number 4, unnecessary conflict is kept to a minimum in our workplace. And the last question for this factor is our workplace has effective ways of addressing inappropriate behavior by customers or clients. Perfect. So please tally your score, and you should get a number out of 20. So let's hear back from Julia on some ideas for respect and civility in the workplace.
So I think some of the questions that came in prior to this webinar were, what factors should we focus on first? And at CMHA, as I mentioned, we chose 4, but the first 2 that we focused on were the second to last one that we'll talk about today, and which was psychological protection, and then the other one was civility and respect. And in BC, there's legislation around bullying and harassment. Civility and respect is definitely the other end of the continuum, and we know when it's not there, but sometimes we have a hard time identifying it when it is. So here's some ideas. So address uncivil behavior promptly, promote respectful leadership behavior, adopt non-discriminatory language. When we focused on this particular factor, we spoke to staff, and staff came up with ideas of what they'd like to see about how we can further this discussion, and we ended up bringing in an external facilitator to have a discussion with our staff team around civility and respect. And I think my biggest takeaway from that session was his description of the golden rule versus the platinum rule, and the golden rule being treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. The platinum rule is really about treating others as they themselves would like to be treated, so that we're not looking at everything through our own lens. So this is just one small thing that you could consider.
Great. So I think our next factor, factor 5, is actually in the standard referred to as psychological job demands, and I'm hoping that Julia can speak to this one a little bit. It's by Guarding Minds, called Psychological Competencies and Requirements.
So this is a work environment where there is a good fit between employees' interpersonal and emotional competencies and the requirements of the position they hold. So those of you who are on the phone who are familiar with job descriptions and developing job descriptions, there's obviously an aspect to this where we look at what are the competencies and requirements for that particular position, and then finding the right candidate who's a match. In an organization that is psychologically healthy and safe, and psychological competencies and requirements is addressed, there is enhanced job performance and overall productivity. There's greater job satisfaction, increased retention of skilled staff, and enhanced recruitment success. This is where employees feel capable and successful in their work.
Okay, fantastic. So now we are going to turn to the next slide, which is, again, a mini quiz for you. So please let us know by writing down on a piece of paper, to what extent do you agree with the following statements? Number 1, hiring or promotion decisions consider the people skills necessary for a specific position. Number 2, our company hires people who fit well within the organization. Number 3, employees have the social and emotional skills needed to do their jobs well. Number 4, supervisors believe that social skills are as valuable as other skills. And number 5, positions make good use of employees' personal strengths. So again, tally that one out of 20, and now we will talk to Julia about some ideas for this factor.
So the first one I've mentioned already, which is to require relevant interpersonal emotional competencies when filling positions. The second is to orient and train employees for interpersonal emotional competencies. And the third would be to, again, include interpersonal and emotional competencies in the job description.
Excellent. So the next factor that we will be looking at is called growth and development. Do you mind walking us through the objective for this one, Julia?
For sure. It's a work environment where employees receive encouragement and support in the development of their interpersonal, emotional, and job skills. So what does it look like in a psychologically healthy and safe workplace? There is increased employee competency, there is retention of skilled staff, and there's effective succession planning and internal promotions.
Excellent. So again, turning to this factor, please let us know by writing on a piece of paper, to what extent do you agree with the following statements? Employees receive feedback at work that helps them grow and develop. Statement number 2, supervisors are open to employee ideas for taking on new opportunities and challenges. Number 3, employees have opportunities to advance within their organization. Number 4, our company values employees' ongoing growth and development. And number 5, employees have the opportunity to develop their people skills at work. So again, let's tally that score at a 20 and keep that in mind beside growth and development. And Julia, let's hear some of your ideas on this fact.
So the first one would be to provide opportunities for personal growth and development. At one of the organizations I worked when the CEO took on an initiative where he brought together leaders. You would apply to be part of this table, and he would host workshops sort of in the morning where he would talk about his experiences and share his knowledge with the staff. And I think that was a great opportunity for him to connect with and to recognize and identify leaders within the organization. Another opportunity would be to consider job shadowing, mentoring, or job sharing to provide opportunities for growth. Again, I think that when we talk about job shadowing, there is a real opportunity both within your organization and looking outside of your organization to connect the talent inside with other people that you know in the community. So this is a relatively low-cost option for managers who might not see a lot of opportunities inside the organization, but they know that this person has a lot of potential, so maybe they can connect them with one of their contacts outside of the organization so they can learn from them. Third would be to develop a shared library or intranet. There's one more other organization that I met with recently, and they have a relatively flat structure, although they do have managers and project managers within the organization. But rather than tasking their managers with coaching, they actually looked for people within the organization that had that skill set, and then they started to develop that skill set within them. So then they could be the coaches for the organization. And so it wasn't necessarily tied to the management title. It was more tied to an awareness of your capacity and your capability within that area.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Julia, and also just asking what development staff are looking for.
Yes.
I think all of these are key components.
Definitely. I think asking staff what they're looking for is quite an important part of this whole process.
I would agree with that, yes. So let's move now to the next slide. It's on recognition and reward. I just wanted to mention that if any of the slides are moving a little bit too fast of a pace for you, you should be able to scroll through the slides on your own with your computer. And if that's a problem for you, obviously you can also ask for this presentation and we can provide that to you. And thanks so much for staying with us today. So, Julia, let's talk a little bit about this recognition and reward factor.
Okay, so it's a work environment where there is appropriate acknowledgement and appreciation of employees' efforts in a fair and timely manner. Recognition and reward in a psychologically healthy workplace includes enhanced employee satisfaction, motivation, and loyalty, improved teamwork and positive morale, increased retention and recruitment of skilled staff, and enhanced employee and/or labor relations. Okay, so now we are going to turn to some of the statements associated with this in Guarding Minds at Work. So to what extent do you agree with the following? Number one, immediate supervisors demonstrate
appreciation of employees' work. Number 2, employees are paid fairly for the work that they do. Number 3, our company appreciates extra effort made by employees. Number 4, our organization celebrates our shared accomplishments. And finally, number 5, our workplace values employees' commitment and passion for their work. So again, please tally your score at a 20 for recognition and reward. Okay, Julia, let's talk about this.
So again, when we did this workshop with our participants at Bottom Line Conference, a lot of them said, well, these are all factors, these are all things that our organization is doing already. These are sort of basic management practices, and I'm sure that there are a lot of HR folks on the phone today who have spent a lot of time and effort focused on reward and recognition. It's something that happens in almost all organizations. So some ideas here, most of you are probably doing some of these already, to celebrate personal and professional milestones, to recognize effort as well as outcomes, to train managers to offer constructive feedback. I guess the key here is that most of the time the feedback always has to be timely and specific.
Great, and do you have any kind of concrete examples for us, Julia, on how your managers are celebrating these personal or professional milestones or recognizing the effort?
Well, I've worked in organizations before where if people were pursuing growth, development opportunities, and if they were completing significant educational programs outside of the workplace, that upon graduation or even halfway through or after a big test or the submission of their thesis, that there would be a celebration of that and recognition at all levels. So it wouldn't just necessarily be that person's team acknowledging their contribution and their success. It would be, their director or their vice president, whoever it might be. And I think that, celebrating those are opportunities for us to come together and talk about our values. And when we take the time to thank someone for all of the work that they're doing outside of the workplace, I think that goes a long way.
I agree. I think that's great. And I actually think that brings us to the next factor, which is actually involvement and influence. So how about we talk about this factor?
So this is a work environment where employees are included in discussions about how their work is done and how important decisions are made. In a psychologically healthy and safe workplace, involvement and influence looks like greater employee job satisfaction and motivation, where employees take an active role in addressing challenges at work, and there are positive employee or labor relations.
Okay, so please everyone take out your piece of paper again, and we're going to go through the following statements. To what extent do you agree with? Number 1, employees are able to talk to their immediate supervisors about how they do their work. Number 2, employees have some control over how they organize their work. Number 3, employees' opinions and suggestions are considered at work. Number 4, employees are informed of important changes that may impact how their work is done. And finally, number 5, our workplace encourages input from all staff on important decisions related to their work. So again, please tally your score of 20. And Julia, what do you think about this involvement and influence in the workplace, and what is CMHA doing?
So on a personal level, I find this very, very important, but I also find it a challenge because sometimes you just need to get things done, and so this does take time. I think it takes time to have meaningful contribution from employees about the work itself and how it's done. So some ideas here were to increase responsibility and reduce micromanagement, to create a mechanism for continual feedback. So whether that's regular meetings or focus groups with your staff or just a regular, one-on-one conversation in the hallways, sometimes those things are really important. Number 3 would be to encourage discussions between supervisors and employees about how work is done and how it can be improved. So really involving them in discussions about how we can change this to be more effective.
Okay, perfect. And I think this actually flows into the next factor, because often our ideas may be about our own workload. And so next we talk about the workload management.
Yes, the terrifying one. I think there was a general acknowledgement in pretty much all my discussions with other organizations that workload management is a real challenge in a time where we really look at time as something that is scarce. It is definitely the biggest stressor for most workplaces. The objective here is to create a work environment where tasks and responsibilities can be accomplished successfully within the time available. So workload management in a psychologically healthy and safe workplace includes reduced staff stress and or burnout, fewer job-related errors, incidents, accidents, or injuries, and increased employee retention.
Okay, great. So again, take out your piece of paper. To what extent do you agree with the following statements? The amount of work employees are expected to do is reasonable for their position. Number 2, employees can talk to their supervisors about the amount of work that they have to do. Number 3, employees have the equipment and the resources needed to do their jobs well. Number 4, employees' work is free from unnecessary interruptions or disruptions. And number 5, employees have control over prioritizing tasks and responsibilities when facing multiple demands. So I think that last piece is very interesting. Perhaps we'll walk through some more ideas with Julia.
So as you might imagine, when we rolled out the survey to staff here at CMHA and then we communicated back about the findings, they were very keen for us to focus on this issue first. And I'm thinking that's probably common in very many organizations. And we chose not to focus on this issue first. And part of that was because of legislation in BC around bullying and harassment, so we decided to focus on that and psychological protection and civility respect first. But this is something that we're going to tackle, and we're starting by talking about clear leadership and expectation. And that's because we have to make sure that the structures that we have in place allow us to help staff prioritize the work. And are we doing that effectively? So we're starting there. Workload and management ideas may include to support and encourage success rather than applying pressure to avoid failure. I think we should all spend some time on failure. What is failure exactly? That's another, that's just my own opinion. Number 2, provide education about resilience, time management, stress, and burnout. And number 3, to inform and prepare staff for increased workloads. I think the key here is really to provide opportunities for employees at all levels to ask for help in establishing priorities for their work.
Yeah, I would agree. So definitely involving staff in helping to develop workload type strategies.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're looking at engagement, Julia. Can you walk us through this factor, please?
So engagement, as I mentioned, was the area of our work, the factor that we saw the most success. It was a highlight of the survey experience for us. Engagement, a work environment where employees feel connected to their work and are motivated to do their work well. Engagement in a psychologically healthy and safe workplace includes high employee morale and motivation, enhanced recruitment and retention of skilled staff, and improved customer and client relations.
Excellent. So now please let us know by writing on a piece of paper to what extent do you agree with the following statements. Number 1, employees enjoy their work. Number 2, employees are willing to give extra effort at work if needed. Number 3, employees describe work as an important part of who they are. Number 4, employees are committed to the success of our organization. And number 5, employees are proud of the work that they do. So again, tabulate that score at a 20. And Julia, let's talk about the engagement ideas that you've experienced at CMHA.
So there's some ideas that we have on the slide presentation, which are to foster the use of individual talents and strengths, to provide space for employees to gather, and to publicly acknowledge employees or teams. As I mentioned, if these are all factors that you're tackling individually, I think there is, and a lot of organizations are addressing engagement, I really think that there is an opportunity for you to look at the national standard as being the framework that you approach all of these different components. And so when you develop your psychologically healthy and safe management system, this would fall into one component of that larger system approach.
Great. And so now let's turn to the next factor, which is number 11, and it's balance.
So balance. So it's something we all strive for, but it's a work environment where there is recognition of the need for balance between the demands of work, family, and personal life. Balance in a psychologically healthy and safe workplace includes greater staff satisfaction and morale, reduced staff stress and burnout, and reduced absenteeism and disability.
Excellent. So again, take out your trusty piece of paper and let us know by writing down your score for what extent do you agree with the following statements. Number 1, our workplace encourages employees to take their entitled breaks. So examples given are lunchtime, sick time, vacation time, earned days off, and parental leave. Number 2, employees are able to reasonably balance the demands of work and personal life. Number 3, our workplace promotes work-life balance. Number 4, employees can talk to their supervisors when they're having trouble maintaining work-life balance. And finally, number 5, employees have energy left at the end of most work days for their personal life. I think that was an important one.
I agree.
So let's talk about some ideas for balance in the workplace.
Okay, we have to say that. I have to say, I already told Sam, but I love this visual here. I think it's great. He definitely looks very happy. And I think, in a way, it does demonstrate one option, because in some of the organizations that I've been to or have worked in, they have facilities, and some of them have facilities for you to exercise at lunch, and so then that gives you an opportunity to do that. So then you don't have to tack it on to the end of your day, and it definitely re-energizes you halfway through the day. So it's a great visual. So I think some of the ideas here are to have senior leaders model balance. I think this is very, very important and very, very difficult to do, but I don't think it's impossible, and I think it's something that we should all strive for. At our Bottom Line conference last year, in 2013, we had someone speak from the BC Aboriginal Friendship Centres. His name is Paul Lacerte, and he had talked about love as being a central component to his strategy to create a psychologically healthy and safe workplace. And when he sat down with his staff, and all of his staff sat down and they talked about their goals, their professional goals for the next year, he also asked them to write down a health goal. So what is one of their health goals? And so then he could engage with them and just get a sense of how things are going, because it's a pretty good indicator of whether or not you have the kind of balance that you're looking for in your life. Number 2 would be to promote and support health and well-being. And number 3 would be to provide flexible work arrangements where possible.
Excellent. So yeah, I know I can attest as well, because MHCC is now doing yoga at lunch twice a week in our offices, and I love it, and I think it's a great way to promote mental health and well-being. So let's turn now to psychological protection. I think, Julia, you mentioned that this is a factor that CMHA has been working on in BC. So
it is, yeah. Okay, so psychological protection. It was the first one that we chose to focus on, and that was partly because we were required to do so. In BC, legislation came into effect on November 1st, 2013, requiring that all organizations have a policy to prevent and address bullying and harassment and have procedures in place, and then they were supposed to train their staff and communicate about these policies and procedures. So let me explain a little bit about what it is more generally. So it's a work environment where employees' psychological safety is ensured. Psychological protection in a psychologically healthy and safe workplace includes reduced conflict, fewer job-related errors, incidents, accidents, and injuries, enhanced compliance with legal and regulatory requirements, and an organization where bullying and harassment is not permitted.
Excellent. So once again, take your sheet of paper out, and we are going to walk through the Guiding Minds at Work quiz for this factor. To what extent do you agree with the following statements? Number 1, our workplace is committed to minimizing unnecessary stress at work. Number 2, immediate supervisors care about employees' emotional well-being. Number 3, our organization makes efforts to prevent harm to employees from harassment, discrimination, or violence. Number 4, employees would describe our workplace as being psychologically healthy. And number 5, our workplace deals effectively with situations that may threaten or harm employees. So again, an example, harassment, discrimination, or violence. So please mark that score out of 20. And Julia, perhaps you can let us know some ideas that you guys came up with.
Okay, so here's the first idea is to state the organization's commitment to psychological health and safety, to ensure fairness and resolve issues, and 3, which is where I started on this factor, which is what we did here at CMHA, is we provided training and we developed a policy on harassment, discrimination, bullying. We already had one on violence and conflict resolution. Once we developed that policy, we trained all of our staff. We had 3 sessions. It was both me and one of the other directors in the organization. We developed the 1.5-hour training session and engaged staff in these conversations, and it was very well received, and it's something that I think everyone can do. There are a lot of resources available to you if you're looking to develop this training in-house. You can access information at WorkSafe BC's website, but I know that the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety also has information on bullying and harassment. So it's not something that only people in BC should be doing. It's something that all the provinces should be addressing.
Excellent. So now we'll turn to the last psychosocial factor that's identified by Guarding Minds at Work. That's number 13. So that's called the protection of physical safety, which many people identified as being a strength in their organization. So that's fantastic. So Julia, let's walk through this one together.
Okay, so protection of physical safety, a work environment where management takes appropriate action to protect the physical safety of employees. In a psychologically healthy and safe workplace, there is a policy to protect workers' physical safety. There is training there's training in-house for safety-related protocols. There is rapid and appropriate response to physical accidents or situations identified as risky, and there is a clearly demonstrated concern for employees' physical safety.
Great. So now we'll do our last Guarding Minds quiz here. To what extent do you agree with the following statements? Number 1, management takes appropriate action to protect employees' physical safety at work. Number 2, our workplace offers sufficient training to help protect employees' physical safety at work. So that would be an example here, emergency preparedness, safe lifting, or violence prevention training. Number 3, when accidents occur or risks are identified, our workplace responds effectively. Number 4, employees have the equipment and the tools that they need to do their job in a physically safe way. So some examples are protective clothing, adequate lighting, or ergonomic seating. And then finally, the last statement, number 5, our workplace responds appropriately when workers raise concerns about physical safety. So again, just rate whether or not you strongly agree or somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree, and then mark this out of a total of 20. And then, in the meantime, we will talk to Julia about some physical safety ideas.
So I thought it was interesting that so many of you listed this psychosocial factor as the strength of your organization. I think that's partly because there is infrastructure in most large organizations to address this particular issue. So usually the process is to plan, do, check, and act, to communicate to employees, and to educate and train employees on safety. the best idea, the simplest idea, and the best idea that came out of our session on day 2 of the Bottom Line Conference was someone put up their hand and they said, I'm going to address this by just including psychological health and safety as a standing agenda item on all occupational health and safety meetings from this point forward. Or we're going to have specific huddles that we just, when we do our huddles about health and safety, that we add an extra huddle, or 1 huddle per month is dedicated to psychological health and safety. And I think because we have the infrastructure and so many of you rated this as a strength, it's just a question of adding that in and starting the discussion with those audiences. I think there's a demand, I think there's a need, and I think there's an interest, and there's also a recognition that psychological health is a safety issue. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to make change through this channel.
Yeah, I think you're right. The last factor that we're going to discuss today is actually in the standard, and it's an additional factor called other chronic stressors. And so can you walk us through this one, Julia?
Yes, I mean, to be honest, I think this isn't something that we have done much with yet at CMHA because it wasn't included in the Guarding Minds at Work survey for staff, but I think it's very important to also open up the discussion about what are some of the other factors in your specific organization or in your specific culture or your specific industry, and to include that as part of your assessment and your gap analysis.
Excellent. So now we're going to talk about our scores. You guys have been sticking with us today, and we may go over a little bit in time today because I think we may have some questions that we want to address. But I do want Julia, if you're able to just walk us through this legend here. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so when you look at your scores and you look at all of the 13 factors that you now have completed a quiz for, you'll notice that some of them might be but quite low. So if they're between 5 and 9, then they're considered of serious concern. If they're 10 to 13, it would be a significant concern. 14 to 16 would be minimal concerns, and 17 to 20 would be your relative strengths. Okay, so I think excellent. It gives you a sort of an overall view of what some of the issues might be in your organization and what some of the strengths may be.
Perfect. So what we're going to do now is actually open a poll question for you, and it's the same one that we did at the beginning of the session. And so post-quiz, we'd like to ask which of the factors that we talked about today do you feel are your organization's strengths based on your quiz? So this, again, would be a relative strength and defined as a score higher than 17 points. So we just thought that it would be interesting to do a quick poll again and see which factors sort of came out on top. And maybe this is a good opportunity, Julia, just to have a little bit of a conversation about how we did receive a few questions, I should say, in the registration. And one of the questions was, how do you recommend getting the conversation started about workplace mental health with management?
It's interesting because I think in many organizations, I think this conversation has been started. So really it's a question of tapping into the conversation that's going on. I think there's, in some workplaces there's an open door policy, so you can ask your manager, supervisor, your HR team, what is being done in your organization to address psychological health and safety. If you have an occupational health and safety group, I mean, even your first aid attendants and whoever on your floor wears that big hat whenever there's a fire drill, like start the conversation there. Ask them how things are going and whether this is an agenda item within that group. I think, when we make it accessible for leadership to take action, then there may be a willingness for them to do something immediately. So if, you can, for example, in BC and across Canada, the Canadian Mental Health Association has an activity called the Ride Don't Hide, and it takes place on June 22nd. And so workplaces, they can enter corporate teams, and it just starts the discussion about, I'm going to ride because I don't believe in the stigma around mental illness, or here's a speaker that we could bring in for a lunch and learn. It's a starting point, and I think it's a necessary one for most organizations nowadays.
I think you're right. I'm just looking here at the poll results. We're just going to finish up the poll right now. You have about 10 seconds to answer, and then I'm going to share the results with everyone. And it looks like it's kind of interesting because it looks like there's been a bit of a drop-off in some of the factors, but I can put those online there for you to see. But some similar, still protection of physical safety is quite important, and so you did guess right there. But some have come down a little bit, and so it's kind of an interesting comparison. I don't know, what do you think, Julia?
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I think engagement's gone up, well, relatively speaking. I think once we actually ask the questions about are you connected to your work, you know, and talk about identity and work, that we start to see the increase there. And it's interesting that a lot of organizations are still very much focused on engagement as being the factor that they're going to focus on, and that's probably part of the reason that it's so high here, but it's also interesting that they're focusing so much of their effort on something they're already doing so well, that there might be an opportunity to kind of talk about some of the other factors as well and some of the areas where they might be struggling.
So one of the questions we did get, Julia, was just how do we choose to, like, which factors we should be focusing on? So obviously, like, should we be looking at something that we're already strong in, or, like, does that matter? Like, what do we do?
I think the standard's pretty clear that we should go through each of the factors, and I think Guarding Minds at Work is also it also takes that approach, and I think that's true. I think these are all factors that reflect the psychological health and safety of our workplace, that we should talk about all of them at some point in time. But we do need to talk about what we're going to focus on and in what order. Like I said, at CMHA, the reason we chose psychological protection is because of legislative requirements. It kind of kicked us in the butt to get us moving down the path of addressing these factors one by one, and we're so grateful that that did happen. I think it's a discussion between your management group. I think it's always important to also do the survey with staff so you see where the issues are for the staff group, and then to look at both of those issues and talk about not only where are the issues, where are the strengths and how can we build on them, but also what is our capacity, because even though some of these are relatively cost-effective ways to address these factors, time is money, and I don't think you can address any of these factors without putting some time in. So capacity is another part of the discussion, yes.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of the discussion. So I do realize that we have taken up a whole hour of your time today, so I just wanted to thank everybody for sticking with us on the line. We do have some additional resources that we wanted to mention today. So those are listed on the screen for you right now. The MHCC, the Mental Health Commission, has actually recently added some enhancements to our website, and those will be continuing. But you'll see that now our webinars are actually promoted on the home page. So you can also turn to Workplace under Issues for some more additional resources, and specifically resources on the standard. Julia, did you want to mention anything about the Bottom Line Conference website?
Yes, we are hosting another conference next either February or March. We're just deciding on the dates. And one of the things we always look for are organizations that want to tell us their stories about what they're doing well so that they can share this knowledge with other organizations across the country. So my email is included at the end of this presentation because I want to know what you're doing and what's working, and how both CMHA, myself, like how we can learn from your experience, but how we can share that learning with other organizations as well. So
that's fantastic. I also wanted to mention that there will be a new accommodation resource, because I know a lot of you have been asking about accommodation, duty to accommodate. And so there's a new accommodation resource called Supporting Employee Success, which is going to be launched on June 5th at the Ontario Occupational Health Nurses Association conference, and that's going to be available at the Workplace Strategies for Mental Health.com website, and that's a fantastic website as well to get some more workplace ideas. You see Mental Health Works there, Guarding Minds at Work, which again, fantastic resources as Julia mentioned. CARMA is also listed, the Center for Applied Research in Mental Health and Addiction, and that's an internationally recognized research center conducting specific scientific research related to mental health and substance use, so definitely check that out. We also have listed MHCC leadership for some additional videos, as well as the Canadian Standards Association. So hopefully those are all helpful to you. So at this time, I just wanted to remind you that we also have a space at the Mental Health Commission called Collaborative Spaces. It's an online repository and conversation place for mental health in Canada. So here you can contribute, news, content, events, and just chat about mental health. And there's specific spaces made for just different topic areas such as workplace. So please join us by going to mentalhealthcommission.ca/English/spaces. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for your participation today. It means a lot to us that we are providing you with concrete examples and tools. And Julia, I think your information has been wonderful today, and so thank you so much for your help on today's webinar.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Yes, and the next webinar that we'll be hosting will be in English, and that's on June 25th, so you should mark that in your calendar. Again, we do these on the last Wednesday of the month at noon Eastern Time. So stay tuned for some more details. We'll be sending out an invite closer to that date, and you can also register by going to the link on your screen in a few weeks. And you can obviously let your colleagues and networks know about this. There will be a survey that pops up at the end of today's webinar, so this helps us actually inform our different webinars, so please do participate. We appreciate that, and let us know if you want to be linked with our newsletter or any other publications with the Mental Health Commission. We're happy to give you more information. So this PowerPoint, again, is going to be posted as a PDF for free on our website in both English and in French. And then the English recording, this does not get translated, unfortunately, for you, but the English recording will be available on the Commission's YouTube channel. And as always, I encourage more questions, so both of our emails are there, and you can write to us directly. And thank you so much for your participation everybody, and we hope you have a fantastic day.